Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. The Wild West. The stuff of legends, dusty dreams, and every movie Clint Eastwood ever squinted through. A place of open skies, endless horizons, and freedom. Or at least that's the story we like to tell ourselves. But tonight, we're not watching from a theater seat. You're not riding off into the sunset. You're not a grizzled outlaw with a heart of gold or a gunslinger with a perfect jawline. No, tonight, you're just you. Dropped into the raw, grimy, and often sleep-deprived world of the real American frontier. Before we get started, take a second to gently tap the like button and maybe subscribe, only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I'm always fascinated to see our little Midnight History Club stretch across time zones. Now, let's set the mood. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum. Get cozy under your blanket, even if it's way fluffier than anything you're about to experience tonight. Take a breath. Let it out slow. And let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey. How the harsh reality of sleeping in the Wild West. We're heading to a time and place that was supposed to be about new beginnings. But for most people, especially those trying to sleep in a wagon, a sod house, a saloon, or under the stars, the American frontier was less a land of dreams and more a place where sleep was a dangerous, complicated, and very itchy negotiation. This isn't about shootouts at noon or duels at high noon. This is about what happened after the dust settled. When the sun dropped low behind Swend, jagged cliffs, coyotes cried across the empty plains, and the so-called land of opportunity turned into one giant, uncomfortable mattress made of rock, insects, and existential dread. Forget what you've seen in movies. There were no memory foam pillows stuffed into covered wagons, no clean linen sheets in those lean-tos made from animal bones and regrets, no peaceful prairie nights spent beneath the stars, unless you count frostbite and rattlesnakes as peaceful company. You didn't tuck yourself in. You shivered, scratched, and prayed the lice would take mercy on you for just one night. In the Wild West, sleep wasn't rest. It was vulnerability. It was danger. It was a nightly gamble that your shelter wouldn't collapse, your fire wouldn't die, your horse wouldn't wander off, and that the stranger you passed on the trail 3 days ago wouldn't circle back looking for your boots. So tonight, you're going to experience it. Not as a cowboy, not as a sheriff or saloon keeper. You're just a person. Somewhere between a settler, a drifter, and someone who really regrets leaving Philadelphia. So pull that blanket up a little tighter. Because out there in the dark, the Wild West is just beginning to whisper. You wake up somewhere in the Wild West and immediately regret it. Your eyes open to the sound of something you can't quite place. Metal creaking, something huffing nearby, and a crow that won't stop yelling. There's a taste in your mouth that makes you wish you hadn't opened it. You sit up slowly, every part of you aching, like you've spent the night wrestling with ghosts. And frankly, you're not entirely convinced you didn't. Welcome to the American frontier. It's 1874, and you just woke up in the middle of nowhere. You're lying on your back, inside something that's not quite a bed, not quite the ground. If you're in a wagon, congratulations. You're at least above the snakes. But your mattress is a thin burlap sack stuffed with hay that's seen better days. It's lumpy, sour-smelling, and filled with sharp bits that jab into your back like judgment. There's no blanket, just your coat, if you remembered to take it off before collapsing last night. It smells like smoke, horse, and a year's worth of sweat that refuses to be forgotten. If you're not lucky enough to have a wagon, you're outside, on the ground, under a makeshift lean-to of sticks, hides, or maybe a wagon canvas strung between two poles and hoping not to blow away in the wind. Either way, you're waking up cold. Even if it was hot the day before, the temperature drops like a rock at night. There's frost in the grass. Your boots, left too close to the edge of the fire, are stiff as boards. And your fingers? Numb. You slept in your clothes. Of course you did. Everyone does. There's no such thing as pajamas on the frontier, just layers. And if you took off too many, you'd have frozen, or worse, woken up to a wolf licking your toes. Around you, the world is silent except for the whispers of wind and the soft groan of waking animals. If you're part of a wagon train, maybe there's a baby crying somewhere under a canvas flap. If you're alone, it's quieter, too quiet. And that silence, it doesn't comfort you, it stalks you. The ground is hard beneath you, always. Even with a bedroll, there's no escaping the reality that the American frontier is not a soft place. Rocks shift beneath your hips, roots dig into your side. Somewhere in the night, a spider found your sleeve and decided to make it its bedroom. You try to brush it off, only to realize it's already gone. Probably. And then there's the itch. Frontier sleep is not peaceful. It's an endless series of small torments. Lice in your hair, fleas in your blanket, mosquito bites you don't remember getting. There's no such thing as skin care. You wake up red-eyed, dry-skinned, and covered in small, mysterious bites that might be from bugs, or just irritation from the rough wool shirt you've worn for 11 days straight. Light spills in from somewhere. Not electric, of course. Just the slow, steady push of sunrise across the vast, empty sky. That same sky that looked so beautiful yesterday evening. This morning it just feels oppressive. Too big. Too blue. Too full of things watching. If you're staying in a town, and we use that word generously, you're inside a shack, or what someone calls a hotel, which is actually just a barn with mattresses nailed to the wall. The window is cracked. The wind seeps through it like a thief. The wooden floor beneath you groans as you shift. Your roommate, a stranger you met 2 days ago, is snoring softly. He smells like gunpowder and disappointment. You don't remember agreeing to share a room, but it was either that or sleep with the pigs, which, to be fair, might have been warmer. There's no privacy, no locks. Your boots are still on because you didn't dare take them off. If someone came in while you slept, you'd want to be ready. For what? You don't even know. But out here, sleep isn't safe. Not really, not ever. You reach for your hat. It's half crushed under your hip. You slap it against your leg a few times to dislodge any uninvited guests. Bugs, mice, regrets. Then you place it on your head, like a soft shield against the day. You stand up slowly. Your joints crack like someone stepping on twigs. Your knees threaten a mutiny. You're thirsty, but the water left in your canteen tastes like metal and regret. You drink it anyway. And the air? Dry. dusty. Every breath tastes like wind-blown dirt and ash from last night's fire. It clings to your throat. You cough once quietly and spit into the dirt. That sound, the wet thud of spit hitting the earth, is the closest thing you've had to comfort in days. Around you, the others begin to stir. Boots shuffle. Someone curses. Someone else starts preparing the morning fire. A mule brays in protest, possibly at existence itself. The world is waking up, and you're already tired. Your stomach growls. You remember last night's supper. A bit of jerky that was mostly salt and sinew, and a few mouthfuls of beans that tasted like the inside of a boot. You'd kill for a cup of coffee. You'd rob for one that wasn't made by boiling grounds in a soot-blackened tin cup until it looked like tar and tasted like burnt water. But before food, before coffee, before anything, there's the morning routine, which in this world is less routine and more triage. You check your gun, you check your boots, you check your surroundings, and you check yourself for ticks, because nothing says pioneer life like finding a tiny parasite buried in your thigh. This isn't the frontier of dime novels or high noon showdowns. This is the real thing, where your alarm clock is a donkey, your bed is a burlap sack, and sleep is a tactical decision. You haven't even started the day yet, and already you miss your pillow. It's morning on the American frontier. You're hungry, you're dirty, and none of that is about to change anytime soon. So you survived the night. That's impressive. Now your body is awake, reluctantly, but your stomach is staging a small rebellion. It wants food. The problem is, the frontier doesn't care. There's no diner, no bakery down the road, no warm smell of cinnamon rolls floating from a kitchen. There is no kitchen. There is you, a fire pit that probably went out during the night, and whatever's left in your grub bag. A hardened biscuit, maybe. Some beans. Possibly a strip of jerky that could double as roofing material. Welcome to breakfast. Let's start with the hardtack. If you've never had the pleasure, picture a cracker made by someone who hated joy. It's flour, salt, and water, baked until it resembles fossilized drywall. Soldiers ate it during the Civil War. Pioneers ate it during wagon treks. And you're eating it now because there is literally no other option. You bite down and immediately regret it. Hardtack doesn't break. It resists. Your jaw pops. Your molars threaten to resign. You suck on it for a while like it's a salt lick and hope it softens by next Tuesday. Jerky is next. It smells like smoke and beef, but it's dry enough to spark a brush fire. It takes 10 minutes of chewing to break down a single bite. The flavor isn't bad. The texture is war. If you're lucky, truly lucky, you might have beans. Canned if you're in a settlement, dried if you're on the trail. Either way, they were cooked in a pot, blackened by years of fire soot, and washed. Never. They taste like ash, pepper, and the vague memory of a cow. And don't even think about fruit. Apples go bad fast. Peaches are a miracle. Berries are food for birds and poison, depending on how unlucky you are. Most days, breakfast is beige. Beige food, beige dust, beige moods. But the real prize of the morning? Coffee. Frontier coffee is not a beverage. It's a life choice. You boil water, if you have any. Toss in a handful of grounds, if you brought them. and let it stew into a tar-colored soup of bitterness and grit. It doesn't taste like coffee. It tastes like desperation. And you drink it anyway, because it's warm, because it's bitter enough to shock your brain into waking, and because if you don't, you're going to fall asleep on a horse and die. But let's pause here, because while your stomach is groaning and your taste buds are filing complaints, there's something else demanding attention. Hygiene, or the lack thereof. There's no bathroom. Of course there isn't. You relieve yourself behind a bush, a boulder, or if you're in town, in one of the public privies, which is just a deep hole in the ground with a plank over it and a smell that could melt paint. Toilet paper? You wish. Leaves, if you're lucky. Corn cobs, if you're less so. Otherwise, you use whatever's around. Old fabric, horsehair, your dignity, and then, of course, there's the matter of washing up. You don't bathe every morning. That's a modern luxury. In the Wild West, bathing is a once-a-week event, maybe. You wash when you can, where you can, with whatever water you're not saving for drinking. Your morning routine is more of a dab and pray situation. You splash your face with water from a tin cup. It's cold, freezing, and not remotely clean. It's river water, or creek water, or barrel water that hasn't been changed since Lincoln was president. There's no soap unless you brought your own, which means you probably didn't. You rub the grit from your eyes, wipe the dirt from your hands, and call it freshening up. Your teeth? If you have a brush, it's made of animal bristles tied to a stick. If not, you chew on a twig. Really. You find a stick, fray the end with your teeth, and use it to scrape off whatever frontier filth has accumulated in your mouth. Toothpaste? No. You use salt, or ashes, or nothing. Your breath smells like coffee and jerky. So does everyone else's. No one comments. Hair? It's stringy, greasy, possibly crawling. You finger comb it, maybe tie it back. If you're rich, you might have a comb made of bone or wood. If you're not, you just deal with it. Lice are common. Everyone scratches, no one talks about it. Clothes? You slept in them. You're still in them. You'll keep wearing them until they either fall off or get burned by accident. You don't wash your clothes. You air them out. Maybe beat them against a rock near a stream. But soap is rare, and clean water is valuable. So you live in a rotating collection of dusty shirts and sweat-soaked trousers. Socks? Full of holes. Underwear? Don't ask. Layers? You wear them all the time, because nights are freezing and mornings are worse. If you're a woman on the frontier, it's harder. You're expected to be cleaner, tidier, and somehow smell better while living under the same brutal conditions. You have long skirts that drag in the mud, corsets that crush your lungs, and petticoats that collect dust like souvenirs. Washing your hair is a luxury. Dealing with menstruation, that's an entire nightmare unto itself. Rags, wool, or nothing. No one talks about it. You just survive it. And then there's your skin. Cracked, burned, caked in sweat and dust. You haven't moisturized since you left Missouri. Your hands are calloused. Your nails are black. You are, by any modern definition, feral. And yet, you still have another full day ahead of you. So, you eat your rock-hard biscuit. You sip your burnt mud coffee. You splash water on your face and hope it doesn't give you dysentery. You scratch, you cough, you tie your boots tight, and then you get up. Because hygiene or not, you've got a job to do. Your clothes don't fit. Your house is a box. And somewhere in the corner, something's definitely alive. Let's start with the clothes. Because even before you step out to face the wild and wide open world of the American frontier, you're wrapped in it. And it's not comfortable. It's not flattering. And it certainly doesn't smell like laundry detergent. Your shirt is rough-spun cotton or wool, the kind that rubs your skin raw if you move too much, or worse if you sweat, which you always do. It's stiff, it's sun-faded, it's patched in 3 places and still fraying at the seams. You've worn it for weeks, maybe months. Washing it? That's a fantasy. You beat the dust off it occasionally and hope for rain. Your trousers are thick canvas or old leather, durable, yes. Comfortable, never. They ride high, bunch weird, and chafe in places you don't want to think about. If they're denim, they've been starched by the wind and sun into something that feels more like armor than clothing. You sit down, and they don't so much bend as reluctantly crack. Underwear is optional, highly optional. Many people didn't own any. If you did, you'd be lucky to have 1 pair. Cotton drawers or long woolen underpants that itched worse than a mosquito trapped inside your dignity. If you were a woman, the undergarments were even more complicated. Chemises, corsets, bloomers, all worn beneath layers of skirt that drag in the mud and collect the dust like you're a human broom. Shoes? Ha. Boots, if you're lucky. Leather, cracked, misshapen, barely stitched. Maybe steel-toed, but probably not. Your feet are stuffed into them like regret into a bottle. And if you take them off at night, it's a battle to get them back on in the morning. Socks? 1 hole, minimum. 2, normal. Matching. Unheard of. There are no zippers, no Velcro. Everything ties, buttons, or just hangs awkwardly from your frame, secured by hope and maybe a bit of old string. There are no sizes. Clothes are made or bought too big, then shrunk by heat, then patched again when they rip. They never fit right. They never feel clean. They are not expressions of personality. They are declarations of survival. And layers? Oh, you better believe in layers, even when it's 90 degrees. Because at night, it drops to freezing. So you wear your coat in the morning, sweat through it by noon, and shiver in it again by dusk. It's wool, maybe buffalo hide, heavy enough to feel like a burden, wet enough to never fully dry, smelly enough to deserve its own zip code. Now, your hat. It's not a fashion statement. It's protection. From sun, from rain, from birds with bad aim. It's wide-brimmed, sweat-stained, and possibly home to a spider or two. You slap it against your thigh before putting it on. Not to dust it off, but to evict anything squatting in it overnight. And don't even think about accessorizing. A bandana? Maybe, but not for flair. You use it to wipe your face, clean your tools, or keep the dust out of your mouth during windstorms that hit like the apocalypse. So now that you're dressed in layers of discomfort and smell, let's talk about where you live. Your shelter, a word used generously on the frontier. If you're traveling, you live in a wagon, and if you think that's romantic, you've never actually tried it. It's not a tiny home. It's a bouncing, bone-rattling, claustrophobic coffin on wheels. Your bed is a board. Your storage space is shared with flour, salt pork, and the occasional rodent. The canvas cover leaks, the floor creaks, and when it rains, you sleep in a puddle of your own poor choices. If you've settled, maybe you've got a sod house, literally built from blocks of earth and grass. Dirt stacked on dirt. It's heavy. It's cheap. It's damp. The walls ooze moisture in spring and crumble slightly every time you breathe too hard near them. The roof is made of thatch and wishes. It leaks in the rain and plays host to raccoons in the dark. The wind howls through every crack like it's trying to kill you slowly. The inside. One room. No insulation. No chimney. Just a hole where the smoke goes if you're lucky. You cook, sleep, eat, and argue in the same 12 feet of dirt floor, which smells like ash, old stew, and something that may or may not have died under the floorboards. There's no stove, just a fire pit or a small iron hearth that belches smoke until your walls turn black. Furniture is minimal. A table, a few crates for chairs, a bed frame if you're rich, a pile of straw on the floor if you're not. Maybe you stuff it in a ticking sack to pretend it's a mattress, but the straw is itchy, full of bugs, and it smells like whatever animal lived in it before you did. If you have windows, they're tiny and covered in oiled paper or stretched animal skin. Glass is a luxury. Curtains are blankets with holes in them. Privacy? Hilarious. Everyone sees everything. You sleep in a corner. You change under your coat. You do your business behind the shed and hope no one's walking by. And critters? Oh, they live with you. Spiders in the rafters, mice in the walls, flies in the butter, bed bugs in the bed. You swat, you scratch, you develop a system. If you see more than 2 rats, it's time to move the food again. If something scurries across the floor, you don't scream. You apologize for getting in its way. Even if you're in a town, a real boom town sprung up by a mine or a railroad, you're probably living in a shack, thrown together with spare boards and wishful thinking. The wood is warped. The nails are bent. The roof leaks. The floor sags. The door is held closed with a rock. And if you're truly down on your luck, you live in a tent. Or worse, you just sleep under your wagon, curled up like a stray, praying it doesn't rain. The Wild West didn't believe in comfort. It believed in utility. If your shelter kept you dry, you were lucky. If it kept you warm, you were blessed. If it kept you alive, that was enough. So now, dressed in the same dusty clothes for the 6th week in a row, shoes full of gravel, house full of rodents, you step outside into the sun, and the wind hits you like a slap. But hey, you've got a hat. If you're not sweating, bleeding, or squinting through dust, you're probably already dead. The sun's barely up, but your day is already older than you'd like. There's no alarm clock on the frontier. There's the crow of a rooster, the cry of a baby, or the sound of someone yelling that the cow's gotten loose again. Your back aches. Your shoulders burn. Your hands feel like they've been chewed on overnight by regret and raccoons. But it doesn't matter. You've got work to do. If you're a farmer, and let's face it, most people are, then your entire existence is a race against the land. It's dirt under your nails, cracked lips, and a never-ending list of things that want to die unless you stop them. Chickens need feeding. Crops need watering. Pigs need penning. Something always needs fixing. And the fence? The fence always needs fixing. You start by hauling water. Again. From a creek, a pump, or a rain barrel that smells like mildew and old frogs. You carry heavy pails that slosh warm, algae-tinged liquid up your arms. You use it to wet down the dust, fill the troughs, maybe splash your face if you're feeling fancy. Then it's on to the fields, hoeing, planting, weeding, every motion repeated until your shoulders threaten to mutiny. There's no tractor, there's no engine. Your hands are your tools, and if you're lucky enough to have a mule or a horse, you treat them like royalty. Because when your plow breaks, or your wagon loses a wheel, or the ox decides today's the day it runs into the woods, never to return, that's on you. The weather is your boss, and it's a mean one. Too dry? Your corn dies. Too wet? Your whole field turns into mud soup. And hail? Hail is the sound of God flipping a table just to see what you'll do about it. If you're a miner, your day is darker, literally. You crawl into a wooden tunnel so cramped you can barely stand. Your candle flickers. The air is thick with dust and the slow, suffocating scent of rot and damp timber. You swing a pickaxe until your hands go numb. Your lungs fill with grit, and your ears ring from the echo of your own labor. Cave-ins happen. Gas explosions happen. You pray they don't happen today. If you're a cowboy, your day starts in the saddle and ends in pain. You herd cattle over miles of brutal terrain, through rivers, over cliffs, across heat-blasted plains, where the only shade is the shadow of your own regrets. You rope, brand, shoot, and sweat until your thighs scream and your lips split from the sun. Your meals are beans. Your company is flies. Your bed is the ground. If you're a woman on the frontier, your job is every job. You wake up before the men, cook their breakfast, pack their food, wash their clothes, feed the animals, churn the butter, knead the dough, clean the children, wipe their noses, bandage their cuts, and bury the ones who don't make it. And when that's done, you go out and work the field, too. You give birth with no doctor. You treat injuries with no nurse. You make do with scraps, sew with scraps, live on scraps. And if someone calls you just a housewife, you politely hand them a shovel and suggest they dig their own grave. If you're a blacksmith, you work in a firestorm. Your world is heat and hammering. You sweat before you swing the first blow. Your arms are thick, your shirt is soaked, and your hands are covered in burns that never heal. You make horseshoes, nails, tools, plowheads, gun parts, whatever someone needs to survive the week. And when someone brings in a busted wagon wheel or a cracked rifle barrel, they want it fixed fast. Doesn't matter if your fingers are blistered and your lungs are full of soot. You work until the metal bends, or you do. If you're a child, you work too. Don't get any ideas. There's no childhood out here. You don't play with toys. You don't learn violin. You carry water. You fetch firewood. You tend the goats. You rock your baby sibling to sleep while your mother bleeds from another birth. And if you're old enough to walk, you're old enough to carry a bucket, a broom, or a burden. You don't get paid. You get told, that's just how life is. If you're a trapper or hunter, your job is isolation. You wake up in the wild, alone, or with one other soul who hasn't tried to kill you yet. You check your traps. Most are empty. The one that's not has a half-dead rabbit you'll skin with a blade so dull it might as well be a spoon. You track deer across freezing hills. You sleep with a rifle under your chin and hope the wolves are full. You smell like musk and meat. Your hands are scarred. Your beard is full of crumbs, and your soul is full of silence. If you work for the railroad, your life is metal and misery. You haul iron rails across impossible distances, pound spikes in with sledgehammers, and dodge explosions when they blast through rock. You sleep in canvas tents and eat food so bland it could insult a rock. Many workers are immigrants, Irish, Chinese, Mexican, underpaid, overworked, and treated like tools. If the dynamite goes off too soon, no one remembers your name. Even in town, work doesn't get easier. Maybe you run a general store. You open before sunrise, stock shelves with goods covered in dust, haggle with miners who have no money but lots of mud, and lock the door long after dark. If someone tries to rob you, you better have a gun under the counter and a hand fast enough to reach it. If you're a saloon girl, you clean the bar, pour the drinks, dodge the drunks, and try not to catch a disease or a bullet. The work is endless. The pay is pitiful. And the boots under your table don't always belong to customers who leave quietly. There are no weekends, no breaks, no union, no safety net. You work until you collapse. Then you wake up and do it again. Because in the Wild West, the land doesn't care. The weather doesn't care. The wolves don't care. And the law is too far away to care. So you work, you sweat, you curse. And if you're lucky, you survive. You can survive a snake bite. You can outrun a flood. But you can't escape fear, and fear makes you pray. In the Wild West, belief wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. When you lived a life balanced on the edge of death, faith wasn't about weekly rituals, it was about daily survival. Whether you called it religion, luck, superstition, or plain old fear of the unknown, you needed something to hold on to. Because there were too many things out here that wanted you dead. Or worse, forgotten. Let's start with the basics. Christianity. Protestantism dominated most frontier communities. Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians. There were also Catholics, especially among Irish, Mexican, and French settlers. The traveling preacher was a fixture, a man with a Bible, a horse, and a habit of showing up right when the crops were failing or the typhoid was spreading. He wasn't there to comfort. He was there to remind you, God is watching. Church buildings? Rare. Services were held in barns, schoolhouses, or just open fields. No pews, no organs, just folding chairs, wooden crates, and a Bible thick with sweat stains. You stood or sat in silence, and when the preacher spoke, you listened, because his voice was the only thing louder than the wind. Sundays were sacred, sort of. You were supposed to rest, but rest was hard to define when your roof leaked and your animals needed feeding. So you prayed with one hand and shoveled with the other. And if you skipped church, people noticed. Out here, religion wasn't just about God. It was about community, your reputation, your morality, whether your neighbor trusted you enough not to shoot you over a land dispute. But faith wasn't always comforting. Sometimes it was terrifying. Because hellfire wasn't abstract out here. It was real. It was cholera. It was raids. It was watching your baby die because no one had medicine, and the preacher said, God's will. Every bad thing that happened, floods, fires, miscarriages, was seen through a divine lens. Punishment, testing, a lesson from above. And people believed it. They had to. Because if the alternative was that this was all random, that was worse. People memorized Bible verses like armor. They quoted scripture to explain everything from weather patterns to marriage troubles. They kept crosses above their doors and holy water near their beds. They whispered prayers when they heard coyotes, or when a storm gathered over the hills, or when a child coughed too hard in the night. But official religion was only half the story, because the frontier was also superstitious, deeply so. You didn't walk under ladders. You didn't rock an empty chair. You didn't speak the name of a dead man at night, not unless you wanted him to visit. You kept a horseshoe above the door, hung it upright so the luck didn't spill out. You buried a bottle under your front step to ward off witches. You nailed iron spikes into fence posts to keep away spirits. Salt, sacred. You tossed it over your shoulder if you spilled it. Mixed it with ashes to keep evil out. Some people even fed it to livestock to make sure they weren't cursed. Mirrors were feared. Breaking one wasn't just bad luck. It was 7 years of disaster. Some folks covered mirrors after a death to keep the soul from getting trapped. Owls were omens. Hearing one call near your house meant someone would die. Seeing one? Worse. And if a dog howled 3 times and then stopped, you prepared for a funeral. Medicine wasn't spared either. Healers, sometimes called granny women or root doctors, used herbs, oils, and whispered charms. They weren't witches officially, but people avoided crossing them just in case. If your cow went dry or your baby cried without stopping, it wasn't just nature. It might be the evil eye, or a curse, or that strange woman in town who always walked barefoot and never blinked. Superstition filled the cracks left by faith. It explained what the Bible couldn't. Because out here, no priest or preacher could stop lightning. But maybe a rabbit's foot could. Dreams were serious business. People wrote them down, told them over breakfast, tried to decipher what they meant. Dreaming of teeth falling out? A death was coming. Dreaming of a snake? Someone was lying to you. Dreaming of blood? Trouble. Always trouble. And omens were everywhere. A cracked egg with a red yolk? Don't eat it. Bury it far from the house. A baby born with a caul over its face? Marked. Some said it was a sign of second sight. Others called for a priest. A sudden gust of wind during a prayer? A sign from God. Or the devil, depending on your mood. And then there were the burials. You buried your dead quick. The heat, the animals, the smell. There wasn't time to grieve. You said a few words, covered them in dirt, marked the grave with the wooden cross, or just a stone if you had nothing else. Some people buried coins with the body. Others nailed the coffin shut with iron spikes to keep the soul from wandering. And if someone had died violently, by gunshot, by accident, by suicide, some families burned sage or lit candles around the grave for days. Because just because someone was dead didn't mean they were gone. Ghost stories? everywhere. You didn't joke about them. You didn't mock them. You listened, and you remembered. The crying girl near the river? She'd drowned during a storm. Now she walked at night looking for her family. The man with the black hat who appeared near the crossroads? Don't talk to him. Don't follow him. Don't look into his eyes. A knock on your door after midnight, but no one outside? You light a candle, and you pray. Even the most hardened men, the gunslingers, the gamblers, the outlaws, had superstitions. They rubbed lucky coins, wore charms, prayed under their breath before a draw. You might not hear it, but they did. Because in a land where the law was miles away, and your life could be stolen by a snake bite or a bullet, even the toughest man needed something to believe in, something bigger than himself. And sometimes, belief was all you had. Welcome to dinner time in the Wild West. Spoiler, it's mostly beans and bacteria. The sun's dipped low behind the hills, and the dust is settling like a slow, itchy blanket over everything. You sit down on a stump, a crate, a bent wagon wheel, whatever passes for a chair, and stare into a pot that's been cooking over the fire since noon. What's inside? Beans. Always beans. Pinto beans, navy beans, black beans, boiled, burned, mashed, or soaked. Beans with bacon if you're lucky. Beans with lard if you're practical. Beans with weevils if you're honest. They're cheap. They're filling. They don't spoil easily, and after a long day of labor, they taste, well, like beans, again, for the third night in a row. Sometimes you mix in salt pork, which is more fat than meat, and has a shelf life longer than your patience. It's heavily salted, chewy like a boot heel, and somehow manages to be both slimy and dry at the same time. You fry it in a pan until it sizzles, or until the flies give up and leave. If you're a rancher or a hunter, maybe, you've got fresh meat, rabbit, venison. If it's a special occasion, beef, but fresh is relative. There's no refrigeration, just salt, smoke, or blind hope. Spoilage is your real dinner guest. You've learned to smell everything before eating it. The bread might have mold, the butter might be turning. The milk is probably halfway to cheese whether you meant it or not. And that jerky? You hope those white specks are just salt. You eat fast. Not because the food is good, but because it gets cold instantly. The wind never stops. Even in summer, nights come with a chill that turns your stew into paste. And the utensils, if you have them, you guard them like treasure. A good tin cup, a sturdy spoon, and a knife are worth more than gold out here. Everyone carries their own. No sharing, no extras. Lose your fork, and you're back to using sticks or your fingers. Drinks? Well, let's talk about water first. You don't trust it. It comes from the river, the creek, the well, if you're lucky. It's cloudy, warm, and always suspicious. You've seen what it does to people. Dysentery, cholera, stomach cramps that kill you slowly and undramatically. So you boil it, or you don't drink it at all. Instead, you drink coffee. Still black, still bitter, still full of grounds. You pour it out of a soot-blackened pot that hasn't been cleaned since last season. And if you're fancy, you swish your cup with a splash of whiskey to sterilize it, or to pretend you're sterilizing it. Whiskey is everywhere. It's strong, cheap, and burns like a sermon. It cuts the dust, numbs the pain, and makes the food taste slightly less like old regret. Sometimes it's real whiskey. Sometimes it's snake oil mixed with turpentine and lies. You don't ask. You just drink. Beer? If you're in a town with a saloon, yes. It's usually warm, often flat, brewed in barrels stored next to horse stalls. It tastes like barley, dirt, and wooden splinters. But again, you're not drinking for the flavor. You're drinking because everything else tastes like feet. Now, if it's Saturday night and you are near a town, you might just get a break. Because despite the dirt, the hunger, and the broken boots, the frontier craved entertainment, even if it was bad. The saloon is your haven. Loud, smoky, always on the edge of a fist fight. You push open the swinging doors and step into a fog of cigar smoke, cheap perfume, and bad decisions. There's music, maybe. A piano that's slightly out of tune but played by someone who knows their way around a melody. If it's a fancier place, maybe there's a fiddler, or a guitarist with 3 fingers and a whiskey problem. There are card games, poker, faro, blackjack. Men sit in tight circles, faces shadowed under wide-brimmed hats, betting money they don't have on luck they already used up. The stakes range from coin to cattle to gunfights. You don't sit unless you're ready to lose something. Dancing? Absolutely. But it's not ballroom elegance. It's stomping boots, swirling skirts, and hands that don't ask permission. The women are saloon girls, flirtatious, tired, and tougher than any man in the room. They smile because they have to, but you don't cross them, or their bosses. Not unless you want to get introduced to the back alley behind the bar. Music and dance aren't your thing. You can always sit back and watch the chaos. Fist fights break out over spilled drinks, lost hands, or long-held grudges. The bartender keeps a shotgun behind the counter. Not for show, for sweeping the floor of unwanted patrons. Some saloons put on shows. A singer, a traveling magician, maybe a poet if the crowd is unusually sober. There are traveling medicine shows too. Men selling miracle tonics laced with alcohol, opium, or both. They pitch them with charm, sell them with lies, and vanish before morning. And let's not forget holidays and festivals. They weren't common. But when they came, people celebrated like the world was ending. There were barn dances, county fairs, pie contests, shooting competitions. You wore your least filthy shirt. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else brought moonshine. You danced, you drank, you forgot how hard life was for one night. Food at these gatherings? Better, but not fancy. Pies, stews, cornbread, and boiled meats. Women competed over biscuit fluffiness. Men over who could eat the most pickled eggs without throwing up. Kids ran wild. Old men told stories. Someone always played a harmonica. These moments, small, dusty, loud, were the frontier's version of joy. They were short. They were rare. But they mattered. Because the days were long, the work was hard, and the food was terrible. So when the music played and the drinks poured and someone struck up a two-step in the dirt, you danced. Even if your boots were falling apart. Even if your stomach still growled. Even if tomorrow you had to wake up and do it all again. You don't need to be shot to die in the Wild West. You just need to sneeze at the wrong time. It starts with a tickle in your throat. Nothing serious. just a scratch, a little cough, maybe some chills. But out here, in this time, in this place, the Wild West, that tickle could be the beginning of the end. There are no urgent care clinics, no antibiotics, no hand sanitizer. You don't even know what germs are, not really. You just know that sometimes people get sick, and then they don't get better. Let's talk about what that means. Illness is everywhere. There's dysentery, the grim king of trail diseases. It starts with cramps and ends with you dehydrated and dying in a puddle of your own body. It doesn't care who you are. You could be a ranch hand or a preacher's daughter. One bad sip of river water, and you're spending your last hours moaning in a fevered delirium while your friends look away and try not to breathe too deeply. Then there's cholera, fast, vicious, and nearly unstoppable. It sweeps through towns in days, sometimes hours. The symptoms come fast: vomiting, diarrhea, sunken eyes, and a terrifying sense that the color is draining from your skin. Entire families die within a week. Sometimes no one survives long enough to bury the rest. Typhoid? Common. So is malaria, especially near rivers and swamps. You shake with fever, then sweat through your clothes, then collapse from exhaustion until the cycle starts all over again. Tuberculosis, or consumption, is the slow killer. It doesn't roar in. It whispers. A cough here. A little blood in the handkerchief. Night sweats. Weight loss. You try to hide it at first. Everyone does. Because once they know, people start keeping their distance. And death? It doesn't come fast. It comes every night. In your lungs, in your ribs, in your spine. You fade. You rot from the inside out. And when you finally stop breathing, your pillow is soaked in blood and sweat and the quiet horror of being forgotten. Injuries are just as deadly. Cut your hand on a barbed wire fence? That could be an infection. Step on a rusty nail? Say hello to lockjaw, a charming little feature of tetanus that makes your muscles spasm until your back snaps like a bowstring. Break a bone? Good luck setting it. There's no X-ray, no cast, no painkillers. Just wood splints, rawhide straps, and someone holding you down while you scream into your own shirt. And if that wound gets infected, you'll know. The red streaks creeping up your arm, the fever, the smell. That's blood poisoning. And there's no penicillin, no cure. Surgery? Hilarious. If you need something removed, a bullet, a tooth, a leg, it's done on a table with a bottle of whiskey and someone to hold you down. The tools are iron. The blade is dull. The doctor, if you even have one, probably learned medicine from a book he found in an abandoned wagon. There's no anesthesia, just grit, liquor, and screaming. Lots of screaming. You're more likely to die of the surgery than the original wound. And if you don't, you might wish you had. Medicine in the Wild West is a mixed bag of guesswork, old wives' tales, and whatever someone could grind up with a rock. There are tonics made of alcohol, opium, turpentine, mercury, arsenic, and hope. You'll find bottles labeled "Cure All" in every general store. They promise to treat everything from indigestion to broken bones. They don't. They make you drunk, sleepy, and maybe a little less worried about dying. Until you do. There are herbs, too, yarrow, echinacea, willow bark. Remedies passed down from grandmothers, midwives, and Native American healers. Some work, some don't. Some make you hallucinate and forget your name for a day or two, which is almost the same thing as healing. You smear poultices on wounds, drink boiled weeds for fevers, lay onion slices on your chest, sleep with garlic under your pillow. If you're lucky, it helps. If not, it at least gives people something to do while they wait for you to stop breathing. Midwives deliver babies and pull teeth. Barbers amputate limbs and lance boils. Blacksmiths stitch wounds if they've got the hands for it. Sometimes the undertaker shows up early, just in case. You see, death is normal here. Common. Expected. It's not whispered about. It's planned for. Every family has a funeral dress already sewn. Coffins are kept ready in the back of the church. Children grow up knowing where the graves are, and they're not afraid. Because out here, death isn't a tragedy. It's part of the furniture. Infants die, often. Mothers die in childbirth, often. Men die of pneumonia, snakebite, or falling off a horse after too much whiskey. You die in your bed, or in the dirt, or alone in a shack with no one to notice until the vultures do. And fear? It follows you like a shadow. You feel it in the quiet moments, when someone's cough doesn't go away, when a rash appears and spreads, when the preacher shows up uninvited, when the dog starts howling at nothing in the middle of the night. You fear winter because frostbite kills. You fear summer because disease spreads fast. You fear towns because close quarters mean contagion. You fear isolation because no one will find you in time. And worst of all, you fear the unknown. The sickness that moves too fast. The ones that don't bleed, don't blister, don't cough. Just make people lie down and never get up again. Some called it the wasting. Others blamed curses or sin or God himself. Either way, once it started, there was nothing anyone could do, so you carry charms. You say prayers. You rub whiskey on your chest and sleep next to the fire and hope. Hope that tomorrow you'll wake up with fewer aches, that the swelling will go down, that your child will breathe easy. But deep down, you know the odds. The Wild West isn't generous. It doesn't give you long goodbyes. Just a little cough and a very long silence. They say the frontier was built by strong men, but it was held together by exhausted women and half-feral children who had no choice. Let's talk about you if you'd been born female in the Wild West. From the moment you could walk, you were working. Not chores, not helping out. Real, physical, endless labor. You fetched water from the creek, carrying buckets heavier than your arms. You fed the chickens. You scrubbed laundry in freezing water with soap that burned your hands raw. You churned butter, kneaded bread, shucked corn, skinned animals, boiled lye, and still had to sweep the floor after someone tracked in another day's worth of dust and manure. And none of that even counted as your real job. Because your job, above all, was to be a wife, a mother, a homemaker, a constant, unpaid, underappreciated center of gravity in a collapsing world. Most girls were married by 16, some younger. You didn't choose your husband, not really. Maybe you knew him from church. Maybe he was twice your age. Maybe he just needed a wife to cook, clean, and give him sons. And so you moved into his one-room shack, packed with old smells and bad insulation, and you started over, again. Because that's what women did. You gave birth alone or with a neighbor holding your hand. No doctors, no anesthesia, just a blanket, boiling water, and the hope that both you and the baby would make it. Often, only one did. You might have 10 children. You might lose half of them. And when that happened, when fever stole your toddler, or an accident crushed your oldest boy, you didn't get time to grieve. You still had to cook dinner, still had to milk the cow, still had to sew a dress for Sunday. Because life didn't stop. Not for you. Not ever. Motherhood on the frontier was brutal. Infants died from bad milk, unwashed hands, or a simple cold. Diarrhea could kill in 24 hours. Cuts got infected. Teething led to fever. There were no baby monitors, no formula, no hospitals. Just a woman, her instincts, and whatever home remedies her grandmother passed down. Turpentine, goose fat, whiskey on the gums. And if the baby made it, they worked. Childhood wasn't soft out here. There were no cartoons, no toys, no swing sets. Children were farm hands with small hands and big expectations. By 6, they were collecting eggs. By 8, they were herding goats. By 10, they were driving wagons, aiming rifles, and patching roofs. Play? That happened in moments. Rare, fleeting, precious. A game of tag in the dust. A wooden doll carved from a corn cob. A piece of twine made into a lasso. You didn't have a childhood. You had a job that paid in chores and hand-me-downs. And yet, there was love. Hard, rough-edged love. Not spoken, not poetic, but there in the way your father built your crib, or your mother saved the last bit of cornbread for you. You learned quickly that "I love you" looked like a blanket mended for the 3rd time, like your brother staying up with you when the fever hit, like your older sister cutting her hair short because the lice were too much for you both. Family was everything, because the world outside your walls didn't care if you lived or died. But inside that crooked cabin, that sod hut, that wagon, you had people who would fight, bleed, and break themselves for you. That didn't mean it was easy. Fathers were tired, often angry. Not cruel always, but rough. Beaten down by failure and frostbite, worn thin by droughts and debt. They were expected to be providers, even when there was nothing left to provide. Some turned to drink, others turned to silence. Most just kept walking behind the plow, day after day, hoping this season wouldn't break them. Mothers were saints and soldiers. They cooked when there was nothing in the pantry. They stayed awake 3 nights straight when a child was sick. They mended socks with thread pulled from old curtains. They cried quietly into their aprons when the preacher left and the coffin was still small. And if you were a widow, God help you. Because without a man, you were exposed to predators, to the law, to poverty. Some women remarried in a week. Others ran boarding houses, worked in saloons, or sent their children to live with distant relatives. Your grief didn't matter, only your ability to survive. And yes, some women fought back. They shot rattlesnakes and trespassers. They ran ranches. They fixed fences and rode bareback and taught their daughters how to skin a rabbit without crying. They weren't delicate. They weren't fragile. They were steel wrapped in gingham, but they were still trapped. Trapped in roles they didn't choose. Trapped in bodies expected to give birth over and over, no matter the cost. Trapped by laws that didn't let them own property unless they were widowed or abandoned. Even in town, life wasn't much better. If you worked outside the home, you were a teacher, a laundress, or a seamstress, paid pennies and expected to smile through it. If you worked in a saloon, you were seen as loose. If you worked in a brothel, you were seen as nothing. And yet those women, those so-called fallen women, they had their own kind of family too. They looked out for each other, shared medicine, protected the younger girls, warned each other about dangerous men. They were survivors, just like everyone else, Fauchefons. The Wild West didn't offer much, but it offered one truth. Family was the line between life and death. You didn't have to love each other, not always, but you had to hold together because no one was coming to save you. No cavalry, no doctor, no government wagon full of supplies. Just you, your people, and the hope that tonight everyone makes it through the dark. When the sun beats down on the Wild West, it's not just the crops that dry out. It's patience, trust, justice. It's past noon now. You've eaten your lunch, barely. Maybe a hunk of bread, a strip of meat tough enough to bounce, a swig of water that tastes like warm iron and mud. And now, in the dry, sweltering light of the afternoon, you return to your labor. But work isn't your only problem. Out here, conflict is everywhere. Let's start with something simple. Your neighbor. He built his fence too far west, onto your land. He says it's his. You say it isn't. There's no GPS, no surveyor on standby. Just your word against his. Maybe the two of you glare at each other from horseback, hands near your holsters, silent but hot with anger. You consider going to the law, but that's a joke. Because the law, it's 40 miles away and barely functioning. The sheriff's got a tin badge, one good boot, and a shotgun he borrowed from the general store. His jail has one cell, and the last time someone was locked inside, he dug through the floor and disappeared into the prairie. Justice isn't swift, it isn't blind, it's selective, based on power, guns, money. If you're rich, own land, cattle, or the saloon, you're respected. If you're poor, or worse, new, you're suspect. If you're an immigrant, Irish, Chinese, Mexican, German, you might as well be invisible, or worse, a target. Prejudice is casual, constant, and often violent. Chinese workers built the railroads but weren't allowed to live in town. They were banned from owning land in many states. Their neighborhoods were burned. Their lives were cheap. Mexican ranchers had claims on land that suddenly didn't count once Americans moved in. They were chased off with forged deeds or with bullets. African Americans who fled the South came west seeking freedom, and often found it in name only. They were given the worst land, the worst pay, the worst jobs. And when violence came knocking, no one stepped in. Even among the accepted settlers, tensions ran high. Feuds broke out over water rights, stolen cattle, unreturned tools, unpaid debts. A single wrong word could turn a handshake into a fistfight into a shooting. Guns were everywhere, tucked in waistbands, hidden behind barroom counters, slung low on the hips of men with twitchy fingers and short tempers. And the duel, still a thing. Unofficial, but understood. You call a man out. He accepts. You both step into the street. Everyone clears out. No one wants to catch a stray bullet. Maybe you draw first. Maybe you don't. Maybe your hand shakes. Maybe you miss. Maybe you die. But most violence wasn't cinematic. It was sudden, stupid, and point blank. A dispute over cards, a drunken shove, a gun drawn in anger, no warning, no music, just a loud crack and a body hitting the ground. And then the shooter walks away. Maybe he's arrested. Maybe not. Depends who he knows. There's no forensics, no cameras, no lawyers pacing dramatically in courtrooms. Just rumors, reputation, and the kind of justice that travels at the speed of gossip. Even the towns, those pockets of supposed civilization, were powder kegs. A cowboy rides in, already half drunk. He ties his horse too close to someone else's. The owner complains. Voices rise. Weapons appear. The sheriff arrives too late, as always. Someone's bleeding on the ground. And someone else is yelling, "He started it!" Women weren't safe from the violence either. Disputes over women often ended in blood. Jealousy, possessiveness. A dance at a saloon turned into a shooting behind the stables. And for the women themselves, no protection. If you were assaulted, the law might not believe you. If your husband beat you, the neighbors would look the other way. If you fought back, you were branded unstable, or worse, asking for it. And still, women did fight back. They filed for divorce against all odds. They ran shops. They armed themselves. They formed alliances with each other. They created the social backbone of towns that pretended not to notice them. But still, the risk was always there. Corruption was rampant. The local judge might owe money to the local cattleman who also owned the bank, the saloon, and the only telegraph line in town. Disputes about land, water, grazing rights, and mining claims were settled less in court and more with rifles. And God help you if you were in a company town. Mining towns often belonged entirely to the company that operated them. The store? Owned by your boss. The rent? Taken out of your pay. The script you were paid in? Only good at the store your boss marked up. Try to protest. You might be fired or shot. And there were lynchings, not always in the dead of night, sometimes in broad daylight, sometimes after a sham trial, sometimes without one. The mob was the judge. The tree was the gallows. And the body left hanging was a warning. Fear kept people in line. Fear of strangers, of lawmen, of neighbors. Fear of being wronged and having no one to help you. And yet, life continued. You patched fences with the man who stole your firewood. You drank beside the man who insulted your cousin. You pretended not to see the bloodstains in the alley behind the saloon, because you had no choice. You needed your community, even if it was broken. You needed help when your barn collapsed, when your child got sick, when the blizzard rolled in and the roof started leaking. And sometimes, people surprised you. Sometimes a feud ended with a handshake. Sometimes a rival came through in a storm. Sometimes the man you distrusted showed up with food when your crop failed. Because even in the tension, there was a code. Not a legal one, a human one. You help those who help you. You don't ask too many questions. You keep your back to the wall and your hand near your belt. Because out here, the sun might be hot, but the grudges run hotter. Night is not a lullaby out here. It's a test. And not everyone wakes up to see the sunrise. The sun slips behind the hills, slow and red like a wound closing. The wind shifts, cooler now, sharper. It cuts through your coat like needles. You pull your hat lower, your coat tighter, and you listen. Because once the light disappears, the west becomes something else entirely. The silence isn't peaceful. It's loaded. Crickets chirp. Wolves howl. Somewhere, something scurries across dry leaves. You can't tell if it's a rabbit or something worse. You reach for your gun, just in case, because you sleep light out here, if you sleep at all. There's no electricity, no street lamps, no porch lights glowing warm behind a screen door, just the faint flicker of a lantern, or the dull orange glow of a fire. And even the fire, dangerous. It draws animals, people, attention. You want light, but not too much. You want warmth, but not so much that someone sees it from half a mile away and decides they want what's yours. Crime doesn't sleep. In fact, it wakes up at night. Bandits move in the dark. They ride silent. They don't knock. They don't warn. If you're out on the trail in a wagon, you sleep in shifts. One eye open, one hand on your rifle. If you're in a town, you lock the door. If your door even has a lock. You push a chair under the knob. You sleep with your boots on, just in case you have to run. Saloon fights spill out into the street. Drunks stagger through alleys, some looking for a place to sleep, others looking for trouble. A glass bottle shatters. Someone yells, then nothing. You don't check. You don't want to know. And it's not just men you fear. It's the fires. A tipped lantern. A knocked-over stove. In towns where every building is wood and the water supply is a rusty pump in the ground, fire is the fastest death of all. People scream in their sleep at the scent of smoke. You keep a bucket by the door. Everyone does. Animals come out too. Coyotes, wolves, cougars if you're near the hills. They're not supposed to bother humans, but sometimes they do. If you're sleeping out under the stars, a wolf pack isn't a poetic encounter. It's a death sentence. Even the smaller animals are threats. A snake by your bedroll, a scorpion in your boot, a rat chewing through your supplies. And then there's the cold, the relentless, bone-cracking cold. During the day, it's 95 in the shade, but after sunset, it drops like a stone. You pull your coat tighter. You wrap yourself in blankets, thin, stiff, never enough. The wind blows through the cracks in the wall, through the seams in your shoes. You've got a fire, but you can't let it burn too long. Not with wolves nearby. Not with strangers passing through. Not with thieves who know that fire means someone's home. So you let it die down. You live with the chill, and then there's the sleep itself. You lie on a sack of straw or a pile of hides, maybe a mattress if you're lucky, stuffed with horsehair or corn husks. Either way, it's lumpy, dirty, and full of bugs. Bed bugs, fleas, lice. You scratch, you toss, you pull your hat over your eyes and try to forget what's crawling near your feet. If you're a woman, the danger is doubled. You lock the door, you move the dresser in front of it, you keep a knife under your pillow. You listen to every creak, every step in the alley outside. You know that no one is coming to help you, and if you're a child, you sleep sandwiched between siblings for warmth. The baby cries, the older kids cough, someone kicks in their sleep. You dream of food, or your mother's voice, or the last story your father told before he left for good. Dreams on the frontier aren't nice. They're full of falling wagons, of black water, of wolves' teeth and gunshots in the dark. And not everyone wakes up. Maybe your neighbor dies in the night. Heart failure, fever, snakebite. You find them cold in the morning, stiff as driftwood. There's no embalming, no coroner. You dig the hole yourself. The ground is frozen and the shovel blade bends. You mark the grave with a cross made from fence wood. You move on. Because the shadow of death lives in every corner of the West. It's in the black spaces between buildings. It's in the cough your wife won't stop coughing. It's in the letter that never came back. In the bullet you didn't see. In the knife you didn't feel until it was too late. Even ghost stories, and yes, there are plenty, aren't about ghosts the way we think of them now. They're about grief, guilt. A brother shot over a poker hand. A child lost in the river. A wife who bled out alone while her husband rode for help that never came. They're not stories to scare children. They're stories to explain why the pain doesn't go away. Some say they see lights out on the prairie at night, flickering lanterns that shouldn't be there. Some say they hear crying from old barns no one's used in years. Some say if you walk the wrong trail after sundown, you never come back. But most don't say anything, because out here, silence is survival. You don't tempt fate. You lie still. You pray. Or maybe you don't. You keep the rifle close, the fire low, and your back to the wall. Because if the wind shifts, if the howling gets closer, if the door creaks open just a little too slow, you won't have time to wonder, only time to act. Or not. The night is cold, your body aches, and sleep is not a luxury. It's a surrender. You lie there, on your back, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like smoke and sweat. The ground beneath you is lumpy. Your neck rests on a coat folded twice and still too thin. The stars stretch out above you, wide, clear, too many to count. The Milky Way spills across the black sky like a spilled lantern. It's quiet now. Even the crickets have stopped. You feel the throb in your joints, the sting in your cracked hands, the dull ache of fatigue behind your eyes. You've worked since sunrise. You've eaten just enough to keep going. You've carried water, chopped wood, fixed fences, and held back tears you didn't even realize you were still capable of feeling. But now, nothing moves. Not out here. Not yet. Your breathing slows. The cold seeps into your bones, slow and sneaky. You pull the blanket up higher and shift just enough to find a better spot on the hard-packed earth. It's not soft. It's not warm. But it's yours. And as the silence deepens, your mind starts to wander. To the day, to the ones before, to what tomorrow might bring. You think of the storm on the horizon, the broken wheel on the wagon, the way your child coughed a little too hard at dinner. You think of the letter you never received, of the friend you left behind, of the road ahead that stretches out like a promise and a threat. Because out here, the Wild West never rests. Not really. And yet, tonight, you try. You try to rest in a world that has never made it easy. Your muscles relax finally. Your eyelids grow heavier. You breathe in the scent of wood smoke, of dry grass, of worn leather. You exhale into the cold air, watching your breath fade into the dark. And for a moment, you're almost comfortable. Almost. The night is still dangerous. It always is. You know that something could change before dawn. But for now, for just this moment, you allow yourself to be still, to be quiet, to drift. Because that's what people did back then. They worked, they suffered, they laughed sometimes. But mostly, they endured. They endured heat, hunger, hardship, heartbreak. They endured broken dreams and broken bodies. They endured with nothing but a pot of beans, a battered hat, and a hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be a little less hard. And that endurance? That was their victory, and yours. You've walked in their boots tonight, however briefly. You've felt their pain, their cold, their hunger, and now you feel something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that you don't have to live this way, that you don't have to cook by firelight, sleep with rats, work until your back gives out and your teeth fall out, that you have medicine, clean water, a mattress, a pillow, that your sleep tonight is not a desperate gamble, but a gift. So let that settle in you now. Let it sink deep into your limbs. You are safe. You are warm. You are here. And they are not. Their world is gone. Dust and legend and broken bones buried beneath prairie grass. But tonight, for just a while, you stepped into it. You walked their trail. You bore their burdens. And now you can let them go. Let the West slip behind you. Let the dirt fall away. Let your muscles unwind. Let your thoughts grow quiet. Because you don't have to wake up in 1872. You don't have to saddle a horse. You don't have to dig a well. You don't have to chase off wolves or shoot at strangers or boil your drinking water. You don't have to bury a child or fire a rifle or patch your only pair of socks with thread from an old curtain. You just sleep. Right here. Right now. No fear. No frostbite. No hardtack for breakfast. Just the quiet hum of the present and the deep, slow breath of rest. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in the Wild West. Sleep well.